Let's welcome in the management at TCI Express now. Mr. Chander Agarwal, MD at TCI Express, is now joining us. So if you look at the last few months, it was a busy time for you, especially given the festive season. Give us some color on the volume growth, the sort of demand that you saw, especially from the online players versus previous year.
So overall, the demand of the Indian economy has been growing substantially. As we are aware that the GDP is also growing at about 7%. In general, logistics is the basic fundamental of growth. It depends on the GDP growth of a country. So I think overall the growth prospects are very good as of now. The express industry is growing at about 13 to 14%, and we are growing at about 20%. So we are doing better than the industry average and the overall GDP growth. Looking at the recent festival demand uptake that happened in e-commerce, this was expected. I mean, because of the discounts that all the e-retailers are giving out. And at the same time, we also see that it kind of like normalizes post any sort of Diwali festival or any other festival.
You also help us understand how has been the traction among your key contributors. There are several segments that that really drive the growth for you. There's auto, there's pharma, telecom, consumer durables. If you could give us a sense of how the key contributors have done, specifically auto, because that sector has seen a fair bit of a slowdown. Have you seen any change in the orders or any sort of an impact on the downside from auto sector?
So I think the main difference is that we do not do transportation of the auto vehicles. We do transportation of the auto spare parts, which is pretty much recession proof. What I'm trying to say is that auto vehicles may not sell, but auto parts will sell. So that is what we are transporting, and we saw robust growth in that also in the last quarter. And I think in general, the other sectors that we operate in, like the pharmaceutical and the textiles, they all have been doing pretty well. So we have not seen a slowdown as such in any of the sectors. We have not been impacted by the overall slowdown in some sectors also.
When we just talk about the SME space, they would probably be one of the biggest part of your chunk in terms of express delivery. How has that area been? There were some liquidity issues which impact the SME space much more in the previous quarter. Can you just give us the demand scenario from the SME side of the market?
So, the FMCG market is not what we're catering to. We don't do transportation of the FMCG.
What about the SME, segment. Small and the mid-size segment?
Oh. Sorry, the SME segment is actually doing quite well. What has happened now is that it took about a year since the GST came in and all that for it to kind of like stabilize. But the kind of segment that we are in the SMEs, they're not cash paying, and they're obviously paying by check, and they're pretty much the next top 500 companies of India, so as to say, and maybe little lower than that. So these companies have been doing fairly well. I don't see any sort of like reduction in their production capacity of any sorts. What has impacted are the cash SMEs, which we are not dealing in at all.
What about the e-commerce space? Is the momentum, has it been sustained how it was, how strong it used to be before?
So e-commerce is a very different. It's a B2C e-commerce is a very different animal altogether. It is totally dependent on consumption, demand, and preferences. If the mood of the festival is bright and cheerful, then people will probably go and spend do some extra purchases. But nevertheless, some of the uptake that you see during Diwali and other big seasons, that is big Diwali season, happens and has happened. Post that, obviously it normalizes, as I mentioned before, and we don't expect any major bumper changes happening in e-commerce because now the discounts have gone away. The discounts are only there for like during festivals. And unfortunately, the kind of shift we expected, from Kirana store to e-commerce, that has also not happened. And that is also not going to happen in a very large way, because logistics, delivering the e-commerce to the last mile is still a very big challenge in India.
Okay, what is the kind of tailwind you're expecting in your EBITDA margins as a result of how the diesel prices have gone down? How is H2 likely to benefit from that?
So I think the diesel prices they came down, but guess what? They're going up again now. So, and all year long they have increased. So the always the fundamental quest is, how do you increase EBITDA when you have this type of scenario? So we have actually we put a very important scientific model in our pricing and in our cost payment, where both are kind of like equalized to the level that we want. And because of this, we have able to actually save 1.5% in our EBITDA, 1.5 to 2%, and that we will see in the in the end of the financial year.
Right. Thanks so much for taking our time for us, explaining to us what's happening in the logistics industry.